Hello everyone, and welcome to today's spotlight session with our winner from December's Notes Challenge. His name is Warren, and he's an intrinsic coach, business executive, and lifelong student of personal development, which I think all of us interested in that are more or less the same. And I'm so excited to hear his story, and let's welcome Warren. Hi, Warren.
Hi, Anna. Happy to be here.
Hi, I'm also very happy to have you here. Could you please introduce yourself a little bit and tell us about your background?
Uh, okay, sure. So my name is Warren. I'm from Canada. I'm kind of old. I was born in 1961. So I've actually had about a 40-year working career and business career, which I guess has actually been divided into three kind of distinct stages. So I spent the first 23 years of my working career in a traditional corporate environment. And was an executive with two of the largest financial services organizations in Canada. I then shifted into an entrepreneurial stage because I just was motivated to want to just do something different and for me and just made that shift. That didn't go as well as I had originally planned it to. And then I pivoted, and for the last 10 years, I've been working with a couple of tech startup companies locally here in Canada, both of which went through, one of which went through a Series A and Series B financing, and the other one was actually acquired by a larger company. So that was kind of the three stages of my career, and kind of I've been sort of a leader for the majority of the last 30 years plus in that regard. I've always had a strong interest in technology and the internet, which was a new thing when I was, just well into my career in the early 90s. It became a pretty rapid early adopter of all of that, and was an early adopter of Twitter. And I've always had side ventures ever since kind of the late 80s. So that's a little bit about my background from a work perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I also have similar interest in technology and internet and everything you can do online. It's really so we have a lot in common, I think. But yeah, you're an intrinsic coach. I hope I pronounced this correctly. So intrinsic coach and business executive. And how do you achieve all this together? Also doing your Substack and things online.
Well, it's an interesting question because it's kind of felt like a natural progression for me. So, I guess in some ways I've always been a coach, whether by kind of title or not. I actually, started out as a coach, coaching hockey way back in the 80s. And one of the things I learned in kind of management and leadership with business organizations is fundamentally coaching is a really key and important part of fulfilling that role. So the idea of kind of focusing on the coaching background and just building up those skills and philosophies just kind of seemed like a natural progression to me. So coaching is something that I've kind of integrated throughout my business career. And then, in the early 2000s, I took the intrinsic coaching program specifically and have leveraged that in my startup kind of phase of my career in particular, working with younger professionals and entrepreneurs. And just, it's something I've always really thoroughly enjoyed and have had to put a lot of the concepts and processes and strategies that I share with people to use for myself. So it's just been kind of a natural part of the evolution, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yes, yes, and it's kind of a new trend that I am noticing right now. A lot of people are getting into coaching now, although because I myself I'm also working in the corporate environment and also really applying those all of those coaching, like acting as a coach because I also am a leader and working with people, and it's kind of I believe this is part of your leadership journey to be able to do that correctly and working with people is all about coaching to me, but I see a very huge difference online because a lot of people are they say they're coaches but they're basically teaching, which is something totally different.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting that you say that because there's a fine line between coaching, teaching, and consulting.
Yes,
But they're distinct and separate, and sometimes it's subtle distinctions. So it's easy to get trapped in kind of labeling yourself as one thing, but in fact you're fulfilling a different role without even realizing it. And I
yeah,
find that particularly with consulting, like I've done consulting in my background too, where there's a distinction between kind of advice or instruction on what to do, how to do it, as opposed to letting people kind of figure it out for themselves and
yes,
build
which is
build that
coaching.
muscle, which is
Yes.
coaching
Yes,
exactly.
yes. A lot of people are basically telling you, so I'm gonna give you step by step everything, and this is coaching. It's not. It's just
Yeah, yeah.
simply
You're
teaching.
bang on, and actually, you're one of the first people I've heard actually talk about that distinction because that's something I've been kind
Well,
of aware
because
of
I
for a
know
while
it.
and observing.
Yeah, I have the background from like professional point of view, and I think a lot of people are simply online, especially writers in our like Substack world, and also writers who are providing online services. I think they simply liked this word coaching, and now somebody started using it, and now everybody starts using it. But it's just teaching. It's not coaching, really.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's funny how this business evolves. Still, it's a very good. I think it's a good direction, and it's a huge potential in those kind of services when working one on one with people or even in groups. It's really sharing your personal experience. It's I think the most valuable part of the content that we could create online.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely.
Yeah. So, how did your journey on Substack begin?
How did my Substack journey begin? Well, that's interesting because I actually, so in my entrepreneurial phase, I had built an online presence back in the early to mid 2000s, and as part of that, I got into the whole digital kind of fulfillment and marketing and products and all of that. And then when I my business didn't do very well and things happened and I kind of shifted, I kind of walked away from the internet almost completely for the better part of about 8 years, and I formed the idea of wanting to kind of get back into the an online business as something I've always wanted to do, and this time maybe a little wiser and a little better prepared. So coming out of the pandemic, I started to noodle the concept of I didn't have mindset rebuild explicitly in my mind yet in terms of kind of what it was, but I started to explore things again, and I was focused on Twitter or X,
Yeah.
and I kind of spent about a year or a little or 18 months trying to build a bit of a brand and a presence there, and it was kind of going okay, but I actually attended a webinar in October, and for the life of me, can't remember who it was, but they talked about Substack and how they had shifted their entire focus to Substack,
Yeah.
and Substack was something I'd been aware of for a while because a couple of writers I follow, they moved to Substack right away when Substack first became a thing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of was aware of it and had never really done anything with it. But then when I started to really look at things in late October, it was like, well, this just makes a lot of sense to me because there's it can be the hub of your entire business because it's more than just a social media application.
True.
And I just kind of decided that circumstances were such that I could just die. I had the benefit of time because the last startup that I was with, we had been acquired a couple of times, and I was made redundant back in September. So I suddenly had time on my hands, and I decided to kind of really look at it seriously. And I jumped in like basically all in kind of beginning of November, and have just been focused on building my Substack presence, over the last month and a half, 2 months.
Yeah.
So I'm very new in that regard, and still learning, but quite impressed with the environment, both in terms of the technology, but also the community. It's just very, very different and much more community based and engaging than what I've found it to be on X.
Yeah, yeah, and also you can really connect with people and have meaningful conversations, and it's not like this transactional chats which you have in social media. And it's really
Yeah.
amazing. I hope it stays like that for a longer period of time because a lot.
Yeah, for sure, and that's part of the appeal to me. Like because of the way my circumstances have kind of played out, I'm really focused on wanting to build a viable business. I think Substack is the vehicle that will let me do that. And at the same time, I feel like I can express myself more freely and, my true self as opposed to, everybody's playing a role and pretending to be something that they're not. At least that's the impression I get a lot of times in some of the other social media.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Substack can be that. I also believe it has huge potential, and it gives us a lot of freedom, which you don't get to have in on the other platforms. Um, yeah, but so what are some best practices that you could share maybe about growing? You're so active, and also in my challenges. That's why you won the notes challenges, and I think you're already gaining traction. Although it's very little time since you have been all in on Substack, but still, any best practices for growing on Substack that you can share for that time?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm still a work in progress, but I think the key thing to me is just the best practice is just the daily consistency, and the reason your challenge has been so helpful for me is because it's given me a reason to stay consistent and build that writing muscle every day, because it's in the doing that you improve and that you figure things out, or at least for me, that's true. And
That's true.
so, the key best practice is just staying consistent. And no matter how I feel, because I'm human and there are days where I just don't really feel like it, or it's not working. And it's easy to kind of wallow in self-pity and, no, this isn't going to work and I want to quit. But as with most things in life, it comes down to the building that habit of consistency and staying persistent that makes all of the difference. And I think, probably the second thing that I would say in terms of a best practice is just scheduling time, like blocking time to actually sit and write. So I generally tend, not always perfect, but I generally do my writing first thing in the morning, and I try to be 2 or 3 days ahead of myself. Sometimes I'm more than that. Sometimes I'm not, and I'm kind of writing on the fly, same day, and posting live. But those would be the two key things so far for me, is just sticking with it consistently every day and blocking time so that it becomes a normal part of your daily routine.
Yeah. So I'm still struggling with getting up early because of my 9 to 5, so that I'm
Yeah,
to be able to
yeah,
write something in the morning. But I had some on some days I do manage to do that, and it's really such a it's really an amazing thing because when your day starts like that, it's just first it's a very creative process, and then you're like the feeling that you're already done with everything that you want to do, like as a must have for today is done, and it's really empowering, and it gives you a really great start of the day, and a
yeah, and
lot of energy.
yeah, absolutely, and it feels like a tangible accomplishment, right?
Yes.
And particularly when you're juggling your day job,
Yeah.
and one of the you're in a technology oriented business as well, I believe,
Yeah.
and like a lot of what you do in your day to day can be very intangible.
Yeah.
And so, when you kind of have these little wins that are tangible in in your writing practice, it really reinforces your belief and your mindset, in
Yeah.
particular, and they're really important building blocks.
Yeah. I think it's a major like cornerstone in psychology to have that small wins and rewards so that you can keep progress. Right. Any challenges you want to share and maybe how you faced them?
Challenges in terms of the Substack or
Yeah.
life
I,
in general, or both?
both. Let's be both.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess so. I'll share a little bit about my personal story because it's kind of relevant and it frames kind of how and why my mindset rebuild
Yeah.
Substack came to be. Um, as I mentioned, I had a corporate career that I did quite well at, but at the same time, I just found it immensely dissatisfying or unsatisfying, and always felt like it wasn't really my purpose. And that's kind of what led me into my entrepreneurial business. And as I made that shift, there were a few things that I discovered along the way that I hadn't really clued into up until that time. One was that I had, without really realizing it, my whole self identity was tied to my corporate position, title, and the status that came with that. And when I walked away, it was very jarring because all of a sudden I didn't really know who I was. And I had to spend a lot of time trying to figure out, well, who am I really? What do I really want to be when I grow up? Which,
Yeah.
as I said, I was born in 61 and I still don't really know what I want to be when I grow up. So I'm hoping I don't grow up too soon. Um, and then as I was working through the business, through a combination of poor decisions on my part and just circumstances with the entities that I was building with, ended up in severe financial straits and forced to declare personal bankruptcy, which was devastating to me personally, particularly in terms of just the level of self-esteem and just the emotional impact of having to go through that process. And so I was in not a good way at all, and really have spent the last 10 to about 12 years um, rebuilding myself, brick by brick. And so a lot of what I've brought to Mindset Rebuild is just the tools and the techniques and the processes and the teachings that have allowed me to rebuild my self-esteem and rebuild my purpose and rebuild my finances and rediscover my strengths and my skills, because it's a very difficult or situation to recover from, and eye-opening and revealing in terms of what were decisions and mistakes I made along the way that got me there, because I would have never conceived that outcome as even a real potentiality at the
Yeah.
time. And so, in terms of kind of personal challenges and hurdles to overcome, that's my story. And what I've discovered, on the other side is that life goes on, and we are a resilient species, and with the right guidance and support, anything is possible, and you can come back. And so I'm still in the midst of my comeback journey, and a lot of what I learned about myself along the way, I found pertinent and appropriate to share with the people that are interested in hearing about it.
Yeah. And also help them do like come back from this kind of um situation, right? Also,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah. But that is actually what your Substack is about, if I'm correct. It is
It is.
part of it. Yeah. Maybe share a little bit more. Let's deep dive. Um,
Yeah, so it's called Mindset Rebuild, and the focus is really applying what I've discovered for myself, and helping people to understand how to build habits of success that at the same time will enhance your focus, enhance your calmness, and focus on tools and techniques that I've used myself and that I know actually work, as opposed to the theory. And as opposed to, I find there's a lot of what I'm trying to think of what the right word would be. There's a lot of very generalized sort of motherhoody advice out
yes.
there, and it
Theoretical,
kind of,
maybe. Yeah.
yeah, and it feels superfluous to me, and so I legitimately want to kind of help people and make a difference, but I don't want to presuppose that I know any better what to do than you do, and that becomes kind of one of the foundations of being an intrinsic coach, because the concept of intrinsic coaching, and it's something I really strongly believe in philosophically, is that you have the best answers for yourself within yourself.
Yes.
The intrinsic coaching approach is really all about taking you through a line of inquiry and questioning that will allow you to actually connect with your inner motivations and what's really going on inside you, to lead you to your best answers. Because I don't know what's best for you.
Yeah.
You do. I can help you figure that out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a subtle distinction between kind of the type of coaching that I do and perhaps what a lot of other life coaches or other people that kind of label themselves as coaches might do in terms of the approach.
Yes. Well, since you're mentioning, what is it? What's actually intrinsic coach mean? It's like a trademark.
Yeah, it's a specific coaching program technique that's been trademarked, and like I say, the philosophy behind it is just nuanced distinction from traditional coaching. So the point is to try to help guide you to your own best answers, by tuning into your strengths and your internal motivators. So as we talked about at the beginning, we don't instruct or tell you what the answers are, but we rather subject you to a line of questioning that's going to take you on a self-discovery journey, and you'll figure those things out for yourself. So that's kind of really the philosophy. And so a lot of the content that I provide, and the tools and techniques that I share on Mindset Rebuild, are really grounded in that approach.
Yeah. Now that you're talking about it, I think we had once one training in my job, and it was only for leaders, and I think it was something like that. It was really interesting. For a whole day. I think it was 2 days actually, and the experience was really is really mind blowing. You really go deep into the things and your experiences in internal, like your internal world, and whatever questions you have or struggles, you suddenly get some inspiration and solutions start coming to your mind. It's amazing how this
Yeah,
works.
yeah, no, and I mean, and it's great that you've got a company that's embracing that. I mean, it's becoming more common, and I think it's a trend that I'm seeing in a lot of organizations, but it certainly hasn't been the way most organizations have operated historically. So, I mean, that's great
That's true. Yeah.
that they're providing that kind of support.
Yeah, that's true. I'm so happy I had the access to those kind of experiences. It's really very valuable. So what are your back to your Substack? What are your paid subscribers receiving as a benefit besides coaching?
Uh, so I actually haven't really been offering the coaching explicitly as yet, although I'm, certainly now to the point where I know that's what I need to do, and that I think there's an appetite for it. But the paid subscription, one thing that is really important from my perspective that's really helped me in my journey, and again, it's a fundamental tenet of the intrinsic coaching approach, is just the concept of self-reflection and exercises to help you do that. So do a weekly guided self-reflection exercise that's available to my subscribers. I write a number of exclusive thought pieces that are more motivated by my own personal experiences. And in that, I'm typically trying to highlight a simple technique or action that can be easily applied. Because the other focus from my point of view is I don't believe, and when I'm out looking for guidance or input or content to consume, I'm not looking to take like a 40-hour study program. I'm looking for things I can apply in my daily life that are simple and time effective. So I try to focus most of what I do is something that can be done in 15 or 30 minutes a day maximum, so that they don't totally disrupt the rest of your daily routine, but they just become little seeds that you can plant and play with along the way and make them your own, discover what does or doesn't work for you. So that's kind of where the thought pieces tend to focus. And then I have additional motivational, inspirational content, wallpapers, quotes that are exclusive as opposed to the free subscriber base. And then I've got additional tools and processes that I'm just sort of tweaking and will be adding as time goes on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's key, and it's really valuable and really tangible. And I also think there's a lot of interest to those things, and I think it's a trend also to maybe people are looking for more like bite-sized techniques and content that could basically solve just one simple problem and not hours of courses.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of a social thing now too, right? And
Yeah.
partly because of the internet, like people's attention spans have just become shorter,
Yes.
and at the same time, the amount of information that available to you is like exponentially more than it ever has been in human history.
Yeah.
And so there's only so much new information you can take in and actually kind of process.
Yeah.
So that's something I've noticed with my kids when raising my kids is just there's so much distraction and there's so much information coming from so many directions.
Yeah.
And it's mind boggling in terms of kind of the impact that it's had. And I observe it in a lot of the younger teams that I've worked with over the last the last 5 or 10 years in particular. Like, I'm working with teams which are generally 20 to 25 years younger than me. And it's so different than kind of the people that I grew up with, in my early career, just in terms of approach and ability to focus and and maintain kind of focus and understand or comprehend what's being presented. And it's interesting because in some ways the skill and the processing speed with which the younger generations can adapt and move forward is brilliant.
Yeah.
But there's also a consequence at the same time. So
Yeah. It is like that.
and yeah, it just occurs to me now. I've just done the one thing I always hate to do, which is just sound like one of these old people that oh well, in my day.
Yeah.
So
So
apologies for that.
that was I was supposed to say. I was about to say it was maybe we were the same to our elders. It's just how generations change. It's so amazing. Yeah. Anything new that you plan to introduce in your Substack in the near future?
Well, yeah, I mean, so the coaching, I've been kind of, for whatever reason, I've been hesitant to just kind of formally launch coaching as sort of an offer through the program. I guess partly because I've just wanted to kind of gauge how much real interest or potential there is in just growing that audience. I do see now, though, that there does seem to be an interest, not just through my site, but with a lot of the others that I'm following on Substack now. I'm seeing a theme in terms of people really looking for more of that kind of support. So that's one thing. I've done nothing in my Substack at this point around community, and I know that I have to, and that's another thing I intend to roll out is a proper community chat feature as part of the site. And then I've got, like I kind of alluded to, I've got some programs that I had worked on several years ago that were kind of in a stage of incompleteness that I've gone back to now because I can see the relevance to what I want to do with the site in those. And so I'm dusting those off and tweaking them. So I'll be rolling out a couple of specific programs that are tied to the membership.
Really. Yeah. That's really
Yeah,
interesting.
the one thing, and I guess it's because it's a byproduct of the journey that I've been on.
Yeah.
Like I've got no shortage of content ideas, which I know a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
My struggle is I have too much content in
The
my head,
opposite.
and just okay, which one should I do first, and how do I do this, and stay focused and actually see one piece through before I move on to the next thing. So it's that's kind of one of the challenges we were talking about earlier that I'm facing right now is I've got too much stuff in my brain.
That's amazing. So it means your Substack can grow really, really good in the near future. I believe with those things, I think it's a lot of interest, and can't wait to see how it develops.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah. All right. If you moving on to the closing, or maybe if you want to share anything in addition so far about your Substack before that.
No, my Substack is a work in progress. Even since I started in November, like I've shifted focus probably 10 times, and part of it is just figuring out, well, who am I specifically trying to talk to? And I think, and from a business planning perspective, I think it's something that most of us kind of have to face and sort out. But the whole idea of, well, what is my niche? And I think my niche started out to be just sort of broadly anyone that's interested in personal development. And what I've kind of really realized over the last 6 or 8 weeks even is that, well, fundamentally, I've been a creator in one regard or another for the last 25 years. And I've worked very closely with entrepreneurs the last 10 years. And that's really who I am kind of really focused on and most interested in. And so it's helped me kind of refine my focus to, I'm speaking to other creators. I'm speaking to other entrepreneurs or young professionals that are struggling with a lot of the same challenges that I've struggled with.
Yeah.
And in some ways I'm still on the course on the path to figuring out how to master.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's the other misconception a lot of people have is it's easy to kind of it's easy to present oneself as an authority online, and it's very tempting to want to buy into the fact that, oh, well, this person is writing about this or seems very knowledgeable about this, so I need to take everything that they say as gospel.
Yeah.
Everybody's on a spectrum, and mastery is just an ongoing journey, and the world is changing so rapidly that if you're not
True.
adapting with it, all of a sudden what you know may not be particularly relevant anymore. So
Yeah.
it's a lifelong learning journey is
It
really
is.
kind of the key.
It is, yes, it is. Then I also get those questions, especially about audience. Who am I writing and who's listening, who's reading? And it's really, if you think about it, it's really simple. All you have to do is because everything you do is an experience and you have as a knowledge and background is your own. So you could start with like talking to yourself, to your younger self, and you will be amazed how many people can relate to that. It's just because you're not alone in this, but we somehow are thinking that, okay, my experience is just my own and nobody wants to hear that. Well, maybe that's true, but if you can take out of it some learnings and present it like some solutions and solving some problems, and explain how you solved your problems, then that's a game changer, actually.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're more alike than not.
Yeah.
People are more alike than not. We tend to focus so much often on differences, but at the end of the day, humans are humans, and we all have the same kind of basic needs and desires and motivations.
Exactly. Okay, what would you tell people who are just starting on Substack?
It's a great place to explore and refine your writing and your creative passions. And the best time to start was yesterday. So the next best time would be today.
Yeah, I love that.
Don't do what I did, which is kind of like, tell myself a bunch of stories about why I'm just not ready, or and hesitant to get going because like in hindsight I've lost 10 years that I could have been 10 years ahead of where I am now, just if I would have gotten off the seat and jumped back in. And it's a great big playground, and your kind of writing and passion, just almost think of it as like it's a big piece of clay that you can shape and mold and discover and make your own. And the fun is in the exploration. So like, just get at it, start exploring.
Love that. Really love that. What are some 3 books you find that significantly influenced your life?
Wow. There's lots of books. I guess, honestly, the first book that I can think of would be See You at the Top by Zig Ziglar. And that was probably the first book that was certainly the first personal development book that I ever read that really kind of got me on the whole personal development wagon, and my interest in kind of self-growth that came out of that. And it was actually given to me by my very first boss in 1983.
All right.
Coming out of, and my first job was selling life insurance. And so as part of our training, we were given that book by Zig Ziglar to read. And so and it's not a sales book in any way, but it really reinforces sort of the whole idea that your attitude is the foundation to your life experience and your life success. And it's just that book has always just rang really true to me, and it has been very impactful. So that would be number one. I guess the second one that comes to mind right away would be The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. So less well known than the Napoleon Hill books, but and kind of a forerunner to the Napoleon Hill books. He was part of the New Thought movement in the early 1900s, and it's just kind of like it's a really simple, straightforward kind of series of processes and thoughts that really kind of they kind of helped form the basis of the whole self-help personal development movement and sort of early success movement. And it's a book that has always resonated with me. I actually built an entire program around it that I'm now actually making available in my Substack. Because that's how impactful it was for me back in the early 2000s in particular. And it's kind of timeless wisdom. I believe it's actually the genesis of, if you're familiar with the film series, The Secret.
Yes.
The concepts all came from The Science of Getting Rich with Wallace Wattles.
Oh, really? Yeah. I have to check that one. I have read the other popular books in that area, but yeah, I have to check that.
Yeah, it's an easy read, which is almost sort of makes it easy to kind of underappreciate kind of the merit of the content. So I highly recommend that one. And then the third one for me was Man's Search for Meaning with Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
Which again is more about just he was in a Nazi concentration camp and went through his own kind of existential search for meaning and just how to survive, and so coming out of that was an entire theory around man's existential search for meaning and the primary motivating force for humans is that search for meaning, which kind of ties into then is built into, like Tony Robbins talks about, kind of the importance of self-fulfillment, which I think is kind of like influenced by the same work that Viktor Frankl had done in his work. So that's, to me, that was always a really profound book as well. And and there's others for me, like Wayne Dyer, Bob Proctor, who I've met several times and actually studied quite closely. Tony Robbins, who
I like him a lot. Yeah,
he's like the creator of the modern kind of personal development industry. I remember watching his infomercials in the late 70s, early 80s. He'd be on TV and just like he's kind of built the modern personal development industry in a lot of ways. So those would be other influential authors that have kind of shaped my own kind of thinking.
Great. Awesome. Amazing. Yeah, they're really great ones. Any productivity tips that you could share?
Well, consistency again. I guess being intentional, and what I mean by that is, each morning, if you're like me, at least, it's so easy to just be a robot where, we've got this routine that we don't even think about, and we just start doing things automatically. And, it might just be opening up the email app or doom scrolling on your social media timeline or what have you. But so, like, to me, one of the important tips that works for me, at least, is just being really intentional, which is each morning just kind of hitting reset and saying, okay, what is the one thing I want to accomplish today? And what's the one thing that most matters? And focus on that first and block time to do that. So I'll typically block 60 to 90 minutes on what is that most important task for me before I do anything else. I do not check email, for example, I check my email maybe once or twice a day, which I've always found interesting in the work cultures that I've been involved in, particularly since the 2000s. Everybody seems to think that, whether it's if they send an email, they're pinging me 5 minutes later to see, okay, have you seen my email? And it's like, no, I haven't. and I don't intend to. If it was urgent, then you should pick up the phone, which God, nobody wants to do these days, and actually have a live conversation with me, or at the very least text me.
Yeah.
I think being intentional and just blocking your time.
Yeah. That's a great tip.
I have a rant that I can go on, which I won't, but I'm very opposed to the concept of multitasking. I think that it's moved to a level that is beyond absurd in terms of kind of the way in which people are taught to believe that multitasking is just like important in human nature and it's a skill. No, I'm sorry, I strongly disagree. It's a distraction that means that you don't do as good a job on anything because you don't get the benefit of focus. So I'm kind of an advocate of solo tasking. Do one thing at a time, prioritize your things, be intentional about it. So that would be my 2 cents worth when it comes to productivity.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I also firmly believe in this, and I also tell this to my people. That multitasking is basically, it's a myth. It doesn't exist. Simply, if you want to do something really good, you have to focus, like laser focus on this one thing, and then the other comes next. That's how it works.
No, and the research backs it up. It proves it, right? Like your brain function and your capacity diminish as you introduce more distractions. So
yes,
it's not a science-backed thing in any way.
Yeah, exactly.
the idea that we have to multitask. And it's funny as an aside. Just this is more of a reflection of just the degree to which the technology has changed so profoundly. Just in my adult lifetime, like my second job in 1984, I took a job with a financial services company and ended up in a department that was the very first department that got to experiment with 2 new technologies. One was this thing called email.
Yeah. Okay.
And the idea that we could actually just like send messages to people and they would read them later, as opposed to having to kind of send written letters or correspondence or pick up the telephone. And then the other thing was was the introduction of terminals that actually allowed us to communicate to the branch office directly. And so, that was how I started my career. And then everything just exploded from there. And you've got everything from, the internet to the iPhone to social media. And it's just, it's amazing. But at the same time, it creates an awful lot of challenges for us just to stay focused and cope.
Yeah. It is like that. Amazing. Okay, final question. Final question. If money wasn't an issue, what would you do?
Man, you know what? I would write.
Yeah. A great answer. Great answer.
We were talking about this just before we started recording, that when I was in university, I really wanted to be a writer. And I took some writing courses, and I had some poetry that was published in the 80s and the short story, and it's kind of, I mean, I guess it's like the genesis of a lot of everything I've ever tried to do, or anything that you will do kind of online. It's really about publishing and writing content. So that's kind of what I love to do. So I would write, I would create. Whether it's books, film scripts. I also was a hobby filmmaker for a while. um, even opinion pieces and editorials for anybody that's interested in, if nothing else, is a way to vent. But I would just write and kind of explore the world, help others where
Yeah.
I can, and to me, that's probably what I would do. So nothing like super aspirational in there, but it would just, to me, that's the ultimate lifestyle. I'd be like an Ernest Hemingway. Put me in a pub and give me my notebook.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Actually, so inspiring and amazing. Okay, thank you so much for this session, Warren. It was amazing, and it was really interesting, and a lot of things are coming into your Substack. So really looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you for reaching out and actually providing the opportunity to have this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Join me for a spotlight session like this. All you need to do is to join one of my monthly challenges, either notes or writing. Stay consistent and make sure you add yourself to the accountability tracker. Oh, and you have to be one of my paid members. If you complete just one of those challenges in just one single month, it's highly probable that I will select you for a spotlight session so that you can talk about yourself, share your personal story, and spread the word about your Substack so that more people will learn about it and hopefully become your subscribers. I distribute those sessions to my entire subscriber list on Substack, ConvertKit, NowKit, and my Medium account and my social media channels. It's easy to win those challenges, and all you need to do is just to stay consistent. I see you inside.